Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep in the Novo, episode 22, previewing OSU versus Texas Tech. I'm your host, Ryan Novozinsky, joined here, as always, by my co-host, Sudeep Tumma. We are live from New Jersey, and we are here covering previewing this game of OSU versus Texas Tech, which in the past couple of years hasn't gone in favor of OSU. Not once in my time as an OSU student has OSU beaten the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And that is unheard of because the previous, I believe, 14 years before that, that didn't happen. OSU always beat them, okay? Now, Matt Wells comes in, and I guess he just has the secret formula to beating OSU, doesn't he?
And it's weird because you think about last year especially, that year was 100% OSU.
Mhm.
They looked like they were the better team coming into the game, and Texas Tech was not, to put it lightly, they were not good.
Yeah.
And they come and they upset OSU and Lubbock, and you're just surprised as to why.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, it still doesn't make sense. The pieces don't make sense, but that's college football.
Yeah, totally. It was a wasted trip to Lubbock for these OSU Cowboys. But that was last year. This is this year, right? And this is a really interesting-looking Texas Tech squad this year. You got a two-quarterback system. I thought for the past 2 years, Alan Bowman was going to be the guy, right? You had, some Jet Duffy nonsense last year, right? Especially when Alan Bowman went down, obviously. But this guy just can't stay healthy. This is a guy who Matt Wells has as a quarterback who, Matt Wells, look at Jordan Love. Look at all these other guys.
Yeah, produced Jordan Love. That was the baby. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
When you told me first, man, Alan Bowman's good, I didn't believe you. Because you're right. You look at the past few years, and the one thing that's really stopped him is injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And again, he's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not some clean prospect who's got everything right. But he is the guy, and he has got tons of talent. He's got big games. He makes great throws when you see him. Obviously, there are issues, accuracy, mechanics, different things here and there. But overall, should be the guy. But when you're that injured, not only are you not playing, you're not producing, you're also not developing.
Yeah.
You're hurt in practice. You're focusing on rehab, not getting better. And that's been the big problem for Alan Bowman this entire time. And now you look at their system, and yeah, they're running two QBs from him to Henry Colombi. It's not great because here's my biggest problem. Anytime any team has two QBs,
hate it.
I hate it. I do because I'll equate it to running backs.
Sure.
Anytime you're running two running backs 50-50, right? If they have 50% of the share each, each one is, well, let's look at it this way. If you are running back, you're taking 80-90% of snaps, you're the number one guy.
Mm-hmm.
You're focused on yourself, right? When you have this hole, you try to hit it deep, right? You try to hit those home runs. But when you need 2 yards, you get 2 yards. When you need 1 yard, you get 1 yard.
Yeah.
You run at the pace in which will win the game. If you're running 50% as a running back committee, then you're just focused on, I'll get more carries from coach if I have the hot hand, right? If I bust a 30-yard run, a 40-yard run. So your mind is always focused on, let me get that big play. But then the problem is, when you keep trying to do that, you end up doing absolutely nothing. You end up failing because you're trying to, bounce it to the edge and run for a 30-yard run, but instead you get -3. Now, for quarterbacks, that's even worse.
Yeah.
It's a conundrum that is even worse because when you're a quarterback, you're not only just trying to run for as many yards, or in terms of equating it to running backs, you're not only trying to advance the ball and so on, you're not just trying to pass down the field, you control the entire offense. You decide, okay, this is when we have to run the play. You read the coverages. You're in charge. You are the captain of the offense. That's that's what's special about football versus basketball or most other sports, where you have that one guy who's in command. He is the leader. He's deciding, okay, let me throw this ball away, because it's one of those things, right? You battle lost rather than war lost. You just, instead of forcing the ball down the field, you make all these decisions. And more than anything, you're accountable for your entire offense. You put the ball where the receivers need to catch it. If they drop it, as a quarterback, you have to be accountable, right? Even if your receiver is not playing well, or even if he has a drop here and there, you take it upon yourself. That's the nature of quarterbacks. But the moment you have a second quarterback in, who's the accountable guy, right? Who's that number one guy? There is none. All you're focused in on is, let me hit the deep shot. Let me try to push the ball down the field, because if I do that, we're getting yards, then we're going to do better. But that messes with your mentality, and that messes the entire offense. And again, that's why you said, right? I hate it because you're just going. In the end, you keep trying to push the ball down the field, but you end up actually being worse than picking up 2 yards and advancing the offense and keeping yourself on schedule, because your mentality is not the same as it could be if you were the sole proprietor of the offense.
Yeah, and there's concrete examples of it too. You look at TCU and how in air quotes, success they've had last season, right? Remember that stretch of games too that the New Orleans Saints had where they had Bridgewater and Gosh, Taysom Hill,
Right.
excuse me, mixing up the snaps there, right? Like, and sort of going back and forth with that. It just always sets up for failure. I really don't like it. I hate these two quarterback systems. And the fact that Texas Tech is doing it this year, I think is really hampering their performances. And I think
Yeah.
you'll really see this. And I think it's really interesting. Matt Wells, I think, is a great young head coach.
Sure.
I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be really good. There's a large semblance of the Texas Tech fan base and even the media members that really are calling for him. They really are upset with his performance so far. And I kind of don't blame him to an extent. I mean, you look at the past couple of years, it's sort of the same. It looks like all the same from Cliff Kingsbury. I guess you can't just build something special down there in Lubbock unless you're Mike Leach or whatever.
Sure.
But man, it really is interesting because you got these guys. You got, I think Matt Wells will be able to develop them fine. I mean, you like we talk about Jordan Love. And then Columbia, he comes from Utah State. Was coached by Matt Wells. So we'll see what he's able to do there. But, I mean, going forward with this guy, it's going to be interesting to see. But flipping sides, too. This defense is interesting. This is a team that was really able to – this is sort of what OSU should be most, I guess, nervous about. Because last year, when I don't know if you remember this, but that was the first game where the offensive line woes started for OSU last year for sure. I mean, you talk about Texas Tech, so many forced turnovers, so many quarterback pressures, so many sacks. I believe they had a crazy amount of sacks. And a lot of those guys are returning this year. I mean, you look at Merriweather at that Mike linebacker position. You look at some of these other weapons. There's some weapons on that Texas Tech defense.
It starts with the edges on the defensive line, right? Eli Howard is definitely one of the best Big 12.
Amazing.
I love him. I mean, he's a little bit undersized, but he's got such great hands and power. And you see him as a pass rusher. He is devastating, gets a lot of pressure. And then Tony Bradford on the other side. They played at 3-3-5. You have three guys up there. But those two just in themselves, they are big bodies.
Yeah.
Tony Bradford just plugs up holes in the run game. He's a good pass rusher. And then Eli Howard's just disaster. I mean, he was a disaster, like, in a good way for Texas Tech, right? And from there, you're right. There are some weapons. There are some interesting things. What I love most is the cornerbacks. Zach McPherson, how do you pronounce it? And DeMarcus Fields on the other side. They are two great guys. Fields obviously is picking up a lot of number one receivers. McPherson has really put his performance together. He has 3 interceptions on the season, and that's a good cornerback tandem. But what interests me most is the linebackers.
Yeah.
Right, from Rico Jeffers to Colin Schooler, who is I believe the Arizona transfer, who has been starting since day one. He's been good. The way when you watch them, you see the same thing over and over again, which they do really well, especially on third down. They do this where you always have that 3-man front, but on almost every third down, especially third and medium, third and long, they'll put those 3 linebackers up near the line. So you have 6 guys up there, and then from there they're only going to rush 3 or 4, but you don't know which 4 they're going to. You don't know which linebacker is going to be there. And as a quarterback, as a coaching staff, it confuses you. You have to account for all of them. And what happens is, more times than not, you're getting pressure because even though you might not have the personnel, I mean, you have good personnel, but what you really is doing is Keith Patterson, the defensive coordinator, is scheming up these guys so well because you have 6 on line, you drop 2 of them in coverage, you drop 3 of them in coverage. You confuse the offensive line, and that's going to be a big thing to watch against this offensive line and how much they've struggled, obviously, with all the injuries. Now Tevin Jenkins, who's, again, one of the best linemen in the country, he goes down. It was already just doing enough. Charlie Dickey, credit to him, but it's tough, and that's going to be a big thing here with those linebackers. Good tacklers. Rico Jeffers is a really talented guy who's great range, sideline speed. He can make a lot of tackles. There are some playmakers for sure, but as a whole, I mean, this defense has been porous, right? I'll say this as an overall mode, this is not a defense that you're scared of. But when you look at the makeup of this defense and where they're strong and what they do, that's where I have some concerns in terms of this OSU offensive line going up against the linebackers and the defensive line, and how the pressure is built from this defense.
Yeah, and in addition to, I know you talk about Eli Howard there. Like you said, the linebackers are the people that really would cause concern for me if I was OSU, right? When they creep up there, when Rico Jeffers, when you see Merriweather up there, when you see Schooler up there, like you said, the grad transfer from Arizona, that is such a terrible sight for these OSU offensive linemen who, like you said, have had these struggles. So my question is this, how are they going to prevent something that happened last year, right? Where similarly, you had a similar defensive scheme last year, defensive scheming from that defense, and last year when they would creep up and they would apply this pressure, right? It's going to be, I think, even more so this year because that was a way more talented offensive line last year than this year. So OSU is going to need to do something. And you can't look at previous weeks. You can't look at Texas Tech record, I believe 3-5, and think the same thing like you thought last year, right? Texas Tech, I believe, last year was coming off that crazy, crazy loss to OU, where OU almost put like 70 up on them,
Sure.
and just looked unstoppable. And then the week after that, Texas Tech beat OSU in a very inexperienced type of deal for Spencer Sanders. But you can't look at it like that. You got to look at it, from a perspective of, we can't, have that mindset going into these games. We have to have a better mentality. We have to, fill all these gaps. We need to, make sure we're protecting Spencer Sanders so that he doesn't have these turnovers like he had the past couple weeks.
And starts in the run game for sure. With Truba and LD Brown, get the run game going, and that alleviates pressure. It doesn't just help the offense move forward, which is honestly a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you go from 1st and 10 to 2nd and 5 to 3rd and 2, even 3rd and 4, that's better than negative 1 yard run, pass for 3 yards, and then suddenly you're 3rd and 8, and then it's just all hell breaking loose, right? Because you have a pass rush that can come at you from so many different places,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you're not putting up anything special, the way this offensive line has struggled, it's been difficult at times.
Yeah.
So it's going to be important to sack up there, and again, like I'm saying, a very key way to do that is through the run game. Because when you're able to run the ball, not only are you getting yourself in easier situations, you're alleviating the pass rush, because those pass rushers, those linebackers creep up for just a second, right? You help your coverage, but also those defensive ends, those pass rushers, they have to play it differently. For just a second or half a second, they have to wait and say, oh, wait, do we have to stop this?
Right.
Do we have to play it differently? Do we have to block shed and not pass rush? Because if you don't, then it becomes a very difficult, because when you do that, then you start, you're affecting the mind of those pass rushers, and you give Spencer Sanders just that extra second, that time to look down the field to open up the entire game. And that's the difference, right? That's the difference in the play action game. And that's where it starts. And that's where it starts for me, in the trenches, on both sides.
I completely agree. Now, going into, sort of like how OSU wins this game, right? There's obviously the run game factor. What do you think we need to see from the receivers? If you're an OSU fan, what do you think you need to see from the receivers this game, to really get that separation against these very talented corners?
I mean, it starts with Tylan Wallace and getting him the ball. And it's going to start with, here's the thing, it's not that Tylan Wallace is never going to be like, not Tylan Wallace. The only reason you're not passing to him is because he has 2 guys on him.
Of course.
Because they're constantly rolling safeties toward his side. And then it's going to be on Braden Johnson, Dylan Stoner, those guys to get open. But again, it's not that they're not getting open. That's what people understand about this offense sometimes. It's that the way it's schemed up, sometimes it's one read. It's a quick read, or, okay, that's your first progression. And even when, again, it's the same thing I keep saying. Even when Tylan Wallace is covered, he's not. You find that gap, you find that area. You don't any sort of, if he's ever in single coverage, even against the best corner in the country, you're still willing to throw it to him one-on-one.
Right.
He may be the most physical receiver in college football. He's able to go up and get 50-50 balls like no one else. I mean, despite being 6 foot, he's able to do that. Brandon Johnson start, getting down the field, take the top off the defense, then suddenly you can't roll coverage to Tylan Wallace. These are the type of things. But then it's going to be on Casey Dunn, Mike Gundy, to, scheme them up to get these guys in positions to succeed. If that's getting Braden Johnson on screen or getting him down the field. Because here's the thing, Braden Johnson isn't a 50-50 catch ball. He's a deep threat in the sense that he can run past you. But the thing about deep threats are they may not have to be the fastest guy. They just have to be guys that are able to go up, track the ball down the field. And then Dylan Stoner, get him in positions. Let him run some of those routes where we've seen it when Tylan Wallace is out. He's able to run that whole route tree. He's a very good route runner. He's speedy. He's got good hands. Get all these guys in position. But it's going to just be on the scheme and understanding what the defense is doing and countering that.
Yeah, and I think on the flip side too, you looking at the OSU defense, just more discipline this game,
Sure.
right? And gap contain and controlling that running back. I mean, so Roderick Thompson, he is a good running back, and he's someone that can, not necessarily is. I'm not going to call him like Letty Brown or anybody like that OSU's had to go against this year. But man, he's really talented, and he's someone that could, find these powerful runs and these, very quick too. So if you let up on that even a little bit, this OSU defensive line is not going to have a good day. But that's the key here. I think having some strong contain from that on that defensive front and in that linebacking core, you're going to have a great day for if you're an OSU Cowboy.
And you're right. I mean, that's what it comes down to. When you look at the schedule as a whole, OSU's played some really good running backs.
Oh, big time.
Letty Brown, Breece Hall, Ramondre Stevenson now. And I'll say this. I think of all the running backs, there's only one where I can look and say, okay, yeah, that wasn't a good performance. Even Breece Hall running for almost 200 yards. It came down to 2 plays. One, a lack of contain on one. The other one, a lack of gap discipline.
Mm-hmm.
You just fix those little things, and suddenly 185 becomes 45,
Yeah.
55, right? Against Letty Brown, I think they penetrated so well. They got in the backfield. It was just missed tackles. But again, like I kept saying, I didn't think it was bad tackling. I think it was just such strength from Letty Brown, the stiff arm. There's a difference. I mean, a lot of times it's hard to distinguish, but in there it really looked like the counter. Because when you're shoving down Brendan Evers, big Brendan Evers, I mean that's what happens. That you just have to give credit to Letty Brown. But against Ramondre Stevenson, it was really an OU O-line dominating.
Right.
But at times you're in the wrong gap. You're just little things here and there, and it's just you're countered by such a strong OU pass game, and it's just everything kind of gets jumbled up that way. And again, like you said, it starts with discipline, because you look at the big plays: Brock Purdy tuck and run, Spencer Rattler tuck and run. They've all come down to discipline, because this OSU defense has all the talent in the world.
Yeah, totally. And speaking on that, this OSU defense has all the talent in the world. This offense is very talented, right? They got key pieces here and there that are going to be in the NFL one day, obviously, even next season. But that's sort of the question right now, is that what does this talented defense, what does this talented offense do going forward? What does this team as a whole do going forward? And sort of what becomes their new mindset? How do you recover from a loss like OU? It was your biggest rivalry of the year. Obviously, that's your biggest rivalry game. And then going forward, you have to, sort of switch your mentality and boost morale by beating this, Texas Tech. Do you think OSU looks depleted in this game? And what do you think their mindset and goal becomes going on in the season?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to get it right into their head, right? But at the same time, you can't let yourself get bogged down by a loss like that.
Right.
You just have to keep playing and be all you can be. Because obviously, you don't control your own destiny. You're not in that same position anymore that you were before the OU game. But at the same time, you win the next 3 games. Even if they are opponents that aren't so scary. Football's still football. Sports is still sports. You can lose to anyone on any given day in any sport. And you don't want that to happen. So you keep playing the same brand of football. You play impressive football. You look composed. You don't worry about the resume. You don't worry about anything else, because you worry about the issues that you have in getting around that and finding things, so that when the college football committee looks at you, they look at the eye test, not just at the resume. And again, I mean, look, Texas and Iowa State are playing this week. You've got to hope for some things to go in your favor, but it's not out of the question, right? And that's just where you go from here. Again, like I said, some things obviously got to go in your favor, but at the same time, just play it out and be the best team you can be, because it's difficult at the top. I mean, you look at OU, Iowa State, and Texas. It's a difficult. I mean, the cream of the crop is up there. The best 4 teams, and then there's a little bit of drop off for sure. But you just keep being what you need to do. You keep winning and go from there. I mean, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, totally. It's a game of football. You got to continuously go out there week after week, despite a loss, despite a crazy loss here and there, right? Especially that loss against Oklahoma, your biggest rival. But the number 21 OSU Cowboys will be playing Texas Tech this weekend at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our time, 11 a.m. All you Central Time Zone people are going to be tuning in around then. But until then, we will have all the coverage for all of you right here on Deep in the Novo and right on Ocali.com. Make sure you tune in. Have a great day, and talk to you soon.